Hi everyone, it's Professor Opterbeck. I'm making this short video to welcome you all to our Faith, Values, and Rule of Law class. Let me first give you a little bit of an introduction to myself. I am a professor of law here at Seton Hall University Law School, where I am also the director of a newly formed program that we started last year called Faith, Values, and the Rule of Law, which is this class is part of. I am also the co-director of our Gibbons Institute of Law, Science, and Technology and our Institute for Privacy Protection. I graduated from Seton Hall Law in 1991, quite a while ago. I practiced for more than a decade at a law firm called McCarter and English. I was a partner there for a few years, got an LLM in intellectual property and antitrust from New York University Law School, and then I was able to transition into teaching. I taught at Seton Hall for a couple years as a fellow, and then I taught at CUNY for a few years, and then I came back to Seton Hall on the tenure track in 2007, and I've been here ever since. So I've been here almost 20 years as a full-time tenure line professor. And I'm really grateful to be able to have begun this program. In addition to my legal training, one of my interests and passions is religion and theology and philosophy. And so over the course of the past decade or so, I've earned a master's in theological studies from Fuller Theological Seminary in California and a PhD in systematic and philosophical theology from the University of Nottingham, where I studied with Connor Cunningham and John Milbank. If you know theology, you might have heard the name Milbank. So I learned a lot from all of that. I've really enjoyed it. You'll see in the syllabus that I've published 3 books on theology and law and ethics with theology publishers, which are part of our secondary source readings for this class. I've also published a number of articles in theology and other journals, recently a couple on AI and religion and theology, which everyone's really talking about, which is another real interest of mine. My traditional legal scholarship is in law and technology. I do a lot of work on intellectual property, copyright, as well as AI and cybersecurity, privacy, and other issues along those lines. So this course is not a typical law school course in a number of ways. For one thing, this year, in addition to law students, people who are completing their Juris Doctor and LLM degrees, we have a cohort of adult learners, and I'm really excited about this. A number of our adult learner cohort, some are lawyers, some are people in ministry or other religious contexts, some are people in policy contexts, some are retired. A really great group of people who are going to be part of our learning community this semester. And one of my goals for this program is that we'd be bringing together people in the legal professions and people in other professions, people in legal academic disciplines and theology and religion and other academic disciplines, and people of different generations who can meet with each other and converse with each other. And, maybe by doing that, contribute just a little bit toward a society that learns to get along a little bit better and to learn from each other. So I'm very excited about the opportunities that we have in front of us this semester. It's also a bit of different than a typical law school course because we really aren't going to be spending very much time at all studying case law or statutes or the other kinds of things that we usually spend all of our time on in a typical law school class. Instead, most of our readings are primary source documents from deep in historical and philosophical and religious traditions about the nature of law, the nature of the human person, the nature of God or the divine or the transcendent, and the way those things relate together. And part of my belief and my philosophy for this course, as I mentioned in the syllabus, is that in what we might call a secular age, in an age when at least at sort of elite levels or certain kinds of discourses, religion and theology are really pushed to the side, that we actually need to recover some of the deeper wisdom of those sources to kind of reinvigorate our discussion about what it means to be a human being living in a society together and how the law relates to that. We do have a lot of discourse like that in American culture. We always have, and I'm sure that we always will. And some of it is really great, and some of it I think is maybe a little less than great. And so what I really want to do in this course is kind of bring out what I consider some of the really important sources and ways of looking at things that we can discuss together and learn from each other. But in addition to being a way of recovery, what we're doing is also a way of critique. These deep traditions have beautiful things to say about the nature of the human person and how law and moral and ethical and theological principles bind us together, but they also often marginalize people. We'll see that many of our deep sources supported slavery, and we'll see that many of our sources marginalized women and marginalize other people in society. And so we want to learn not only how to draw out of these traditions, but also how to be critical of those traditions. Now, as I said, the bread and butter for our time together is going to be these primary source readings. And I have here open our Canvas page for the course. You could also take a look at the syllabus. This is the syllabus for law students. There's also a version of the syllabus which is basically the same except for a couple of the assignments for adult learners that has our flow and our readings throughout the semester. So I really want you to spend some time and make sure that you read all of the primary source readings that are assigned. These are all going to be available through links to sources in the library and or to PDF links or to external content. Now, I know that when you look at these, it'll look like a lot of reading when you include the primary and secondary sources, and it is a lot of reading. But the primary sources, I've really made an effort to curate and to kind of pull out those excerpts that are most important to us. So sometimes the list really looks long, but the readings really aren't quite as bad maybe as the list would suggest. But there is a lot of reading, and it is unique and different from the kind of reading that we normally would do in a law school setting. As for the secondary source readings, these are here to help you. I would say that they are recommended, but not necessarily required. I would recommend that you at least take a look at each of these and maybe skim through them. And when there are areas that you find that are of particular interest, spend some time taking a look at those. And of course, I give you secondary readings from some of my books if you want to have a feel for how I think about some of these things, or at least how I thought about them when I wrote those books, because sometimes my own thinking changes as well. You can take a look at those. So all of those things are available on Canvas, and I recommend that you look to Canvas as you're preparing your reading, because that will have kind of the most up-to-date sources. Sometimes I supplement things or change things a little from the syllabus. Also on Canvas, you will find videos that relate to all of the readings for the particular unit that we're in. Some of those videos, as you will see, are things that I have produced and put together myself and scripted. Some of those are going to be links to third-party or external sources that have done a really great job. And I would say the videos are really required. You should spend a bit of time. None of them are super long, but spend a bit of time kind of looking at those videos that will give you a good sense of background. I would even say, as you're working through a particular part of the primary source readings, maybe look at the videos first, then maybe take a look at the primary sources, then maybe see if you want to look at some of the secondary sources. In terms of the general flow of our course, we are meeting online for periods of about a month at a time. And each of those periods will cover one, or sometimes, depending on what we're doing, perhaps 2 units of material, kind of running through the ancient Near East, through antiquity, through early Christendom and early Judaism, through the rise of Islam, the Middle Ages, the Renaissance, modernity, even all the way up to the present when we get to the end of the year. So at the conclusion of each unit, we then meet in person for a convivium dinner. And the term convivium relates to a classical tradition, an ancient tradition, of gathering together over a meal and something to drink and discussing ideas. And that's what we're going to do. The convivium dinners are really the heart of this course. Everything we're doing online is to get us ready to meet together and to enjoy a meal together and to discuss these primary source readings. For those of you who are law students, the convivium dinners are required. Now, of course, some emergency may arise that you can't anticipate. A genuine emergency will deal with that. But otherwise, absent that extraordinary circumstance, if you miss a convivium dinner, you're going to be withdrawn from the class, even if it's at the very end of the year. So you really need to make plans to be at those convivium dinners. For those of you who are adult learners, if you want to complete the course and get a certificate, please make every effort to attend the convivium dinners. They're really what the class is about for the most part. So I really want to make sure that everybody's there and we can all kind of enjoy being together. Convivium dinners will be at the law school or perhaps some of them at the main university campus in South Orange. I'm still working on that a bit logistically, and some will be at local restaurants. And we'll give you those details as they come along. And all of the food and drink at the convivium dinners is included in your tuition. As we get closer to that, if you have special dietary needs, we will talk about those as well. You will see in our flow that when we're meeting online, there are discussion board questions. And these discussion board questions, which we call DQs, are an important part of how we get to know each other and converse with each other before the convivium dinners. And those of you who are law students, these are required and are graded. And by graded, I mean if you do them, you get full credit, right? If you don't do them, you don't get full credit. For those of you who are adult learners, invite you and really encourage you to participate in these discussion boards. It's a great way to get some ideas out and to get to know each other a bit before we meet in person. There is also something called tutorial questions or TQs, and these are short answer questions on specific aspects of what the readings are covering. The TQs are due the day of, as of the day of our convivium dinners. For law students, these are required, and again, these are graded. For adult learners, they're not required, but if you want to do them, feel free to go ahead and do them. They might help reinforce your learning. And for each unit, there's also a quiz, which will be due a week after the convivium dinner for each unit that we're covering. Law students, these are required. They're part of your grade. Again, adult learners, you feel free to do them if you want. You don't have to. They might reinforce your learning a bit if it's something that you want to do. Another way that this course differs from a typical law school course is it runs throughout the entire academic year, the fall and the spring semester. So if you are a law student, you can take the course either as an exam course or as a writing requirement course. If you take it as an exam course, there will be an exam at the end of the spring semester during the exam period, which will be basically short answer, multiple choice kind of exam. If you take it as your writing requirement, you will work on your AWR paper throughout the year. There are deadlines in the syllabus about that, and we will work on that together throughout the year. So just make sure that you're aware that it's covering the whole year. Have the convivium dates, 3 in the fall and 3 in the spring, all in your calendar and ready to go. And just keep in mind the flow of how we're doing things. We have 1 or 2 units of quite a bit of material that will be over the span of about a month. There will be kind of rolling deadlines for the discussion questions so that we're talking to each other online. For law students, there are tutorial questions that are due at the end of the unit and a quiz that will be due at the end of the unit. And then for all of us, there is the convivium dinner when we meet together and discuss everything. And then, of course, there are videos and secondary readings that give some additional background on the primary sources, which are our real bread and butter for the class. Let me just say one final word on our primary sources. Many of our sources are really old, indeed ancient. And so part of the discipline, part of the exercise of what we're doing in the course is learning how to experience a bit of what we can call hermeneutical distance from those ancient sources. We don't live in Palestine 2,000 years ago, or in Babylon 3,500 years ago, or in Germany in the Middle Ages. We have a distance from that culturally, linguistically, and otherwise. And so we can't expect all of those sources to address all of our contemporary concerns or to address similar concerns in the same way that we might address them today. What we want to be able to do is read them charitably in their original context and to try and do a bit of work of kind of cultural translation to understand what the concerns of those people were who were producing and using these texts, and then to see how they might relate to our circumstance. And related to that, some of the sources we're looking at are sources that some religious traditions will consider part of their scriptures. So we will be looking in this unit, for example, at portions of the Tanakh, of the Hebrew Bible. That is the scriptures in the Jewish tradition and is also part of the scriptures in the Christian tradition. And we will be looking at later in the fall at the New Testament, which is part of the scriptures in the Christian tradition. And then next year we will be looking at the Quran, which are the scriptures in the Islamic tradition, and we're looking at other sources, for example, in this unit at some of the Hindu Dharma Sutras, which could be considered something like scripture, analogous to something like scripture in those traditions. So we want to do that with a sense of both academic engagement and respect. So from academic engagement, this is an academic enterprise, so we are looking at those texts like human condition, culturally conditioned sources, but we are also respecting that religious traditions are treating them in some ways somewhat different than ordinary human sources. And of course, even within a religious tradition, there probably are disagreements about exactly what that means. Certainly in my own Christian tradition, there are big disagreements about, well, what exactly does it mean that we might take the Bible to be called scripture, and some very different views about what that might mean. So we want to treat these texts with academic rigor and also both with respect for the traditions that they speak into and that they come out of. And of course, you might be part of the religious traditions that some of these scriptures speak into and come out of, just as I am in the Christian tradition for some of these texts. And so it's totally appropriate for you to think about how you understand them, as religious sources, as scriptural sources. And part of our discussion, both across generations between adult learners and law students and across religious traditions, is another part of the whole exercise we're doing together. In this kind of discourse, we call that scriptural reasoning. People from different traditions with their own scriptures looking at the scriptures of other traditions and seeing what strikes them, what seems interesting, what resonates, what seems strange. And in those conversations, we really have an opportunity to learn from each other. So I hope this is a useful overview of how I conceive of the class and of the flow. Once you get into it, I think the flow will make sense to you. I really look forward to meeting with each of you online as we go through this first unit, and then in particular when we come up to our first Convivium dinner. I'm really grateful that you're in this class and that you're joining this year-long adventure with us.